Hello, I'm Shahan Ramkisoon. Thanks for joining us here in New York City. You're watching Arise News Now, your fast forward to stories that affect you, making headlines around the world in this hour. The East African militants responsible for the massacre in a Nairobi mall call for attacks against similar targets in the United States. London investigators are in Turkey searching for 3 missing girls who may be headed to Syria to fight for the so-called Islamic State.
We talk everything Oscars, the stars, styles, and statues. We've got you covered.
The threat of a terrorist attack is being felt at home again in the U.S., this time from the Somali militant group Al-Shabaab. A video purportedly shows its members calling for the Mall of America in Minnesota to be targeted. 2 other shopping centres are mentioned, West Edmonton Mall in Canada and the Westfield London Mall in the UK. Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the September 2013 attack on a shopping mall in Kenya, in which 67 people were killed. Now, this latest scare comes as funding for the Department of Homeland Security is being debated in Congress. Financing for the agency is set to expire in 4 days. Let's go live to our Rise News Washington, D.C. correspondent, Leila McDowell. Leila, first let's talk about the threat from Al-Shabaab. How is the U.S. government reacting?
Well, you know, it's really interesting, Shahan, how this played out, because earlier there was some public division in the administration over how serious a threat the video posed. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson warned potential customers of the Mall of America particularly to be vigilant, but the FBI said there was no credible threat. FBI sources tell me Al-Shabaab may be able to talk a scary game, but does not have the capacity to actually orchestrate an attack. But by this evening, the administration was speaking with one voice, saying no credible threat, but still deep concern over lone wolf attacks. Security was beefed up at malls, particularly that 80-acre Mall of America in Minnesota, in place now at that sprawling shopping center. Undercover surveillance, information sharing with law enforcement, and bomb-sniffing dogs. Now remember, that mall is located near a large Somalian community that is rife with unemployment and lack of educational opportunity for young Somali men, White House sources say, and about a dozen young men already left to join Al-Shabaab, one becoming a suicide bomber. So the big fear is that these potential recruits have American passports and can easily come back to the States and launch attacks. Shahan?
Yeah, now this threat has clearly raised the issue of Homeland Security funding as Republicans and Democrats battle over immigration laws. What's likely to happen, and will the Department of Homeland Security have to close its doors?
Well, the countdown is on to that shutdown of the department with a 4th failed Senate vote to bring it to the floor today. It is a stalemate that so far doesn't seem to be changing. House Republicans leading a demand for no funding unless the bill also ends Obama's executive action on immigration, as you mentioned. On the other hand, the White House is using the spotlight on threats to the homeland to hammer home the message that shutting down the Department of Homeland Security to overturn his immigration executive order is tantamount to cutting off your nose to spite your face. Take a listen.
We will be forced to require some 75 to 80% of our men and women to come to work without pay. There are serious consequences for the working men and women of our department standing behind me if they are required to come to work and try to make ends meet without a paycheck.
That was, of course, Jay Johnson, and he says that there is a serious threat because 30,000 other employees would be furloughed, and, of course, training of law enforcement and other kinds of activities of the department would have to stop.
Yeah, now the White House says shutting it down would have a terrible impact on the economy and security, of course. Now, some Republicans, of course, challenging that theory, but there are those who say this should be avoided.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, the GOP right now is a camp divided over this, with congressional Republicans fighting each other. Republican elder statesmen are pushing for a new strategy that does not directly link President Obama's actions on immigration to funding. They're hoping that that judge's ruling last week that ended the program, at least temporarily, might appease some of their colleagues on the more radical side. But so far, that's not happening. And the government is preparing for a shutdown. We'll be watching. Shahan?
All right, thanks very much. There was a Rise News correspondent, Leila McDowell, live from us in D.C. As promised, the Obama administration filed papers to appeal a court ruling last week by a Texas judge that temporarily blocked the president's executive actions on immigration. In its challenge against U.S. District Judge Andrew Hannon's ruling, the administration asked for the president's immigration order to go ahead while the appeal is being decided. Obama's order would have stopped the deportation of about 5 million undocumented immigrants. But Hannon ruled it should be temporarily blocked until a lawsuit from 26 states is heard and ruled on. The Texas trial of Eddie Ray Rout, the man accused of shooting U.S. Navy SEAL Chris Kyle in 2013, has been delayed due to an ice storm. The movie American Sniper, based on Kyle's life, was largely snubbed at the Oscars last night, but remains very popular. Rout's lawyers are trying to have him declared innocent, arguing he's mentally ill. But prosecutors say the suspect is faking his symptoms and was fully aware of what he was doing. 11 students from Wesleyan University in Connecticut have been treated for MDMA drug overdoses. One of them remains in a critical condition. Wesleyan is conducting an investigation after helping transport the students to hospital. A spokesman described them as having overdose symptoms consistent with the use of Molly. Now, Molly is a street name for the drug. It's the pure powder from the main chemical in ecstasy. The Food and Drug Administration says it's aware of cleaning issues and bacterial transmissions associated with duodenoscopes. 7 people were infected by the drug-resistant enterobacteria at a LA hospital. 2 have died from the infection, and a third, an 18-year-old man, is under 24-hour monitoring. Coming up on Arise News Now, London investigators in Turkey are looking for 3 British girls who may be headed to Syria. Are they joining ISIS or are they on a mission? We'll examine those questions when we get back. And with the open threat to America by radical groups and the funding for Homeland Security now a political football, what are the real risks for U.S. citizens? We'll take an Arise News in-depth look later in the half hour. You're watching Arise News Now.
The best way to predict the future is to create it.
There's a special breed of achievers out there that are called tomorrow's people, the highly creative ones who live in the future. They imagine what will be and strive to make it happen. They are bold. They refuse to wait for the future. Tomorrow bends and conforms to their ideas. At Access Bank, we share the same sentiments. We've been able to grow our bank to become a leading player in Nigeria with a strong presence across the continent, adopting best practice in everything we do. Our mantra for success is simple: speed, service, and security. Those who shape tomorrow, strive for, and demand perfection. At Access Bank, our service culture of speedy response and drive for excellence is the blueprint for creating customer experiences that will echo for generations. Come, let's work together and take tomorrow.
Welcome back. The urgent search continues for 3 London schoolgirls who are believed to be on their way to Syria to join ISIS. Shamima Bigbam, Amira Abbasi, age 15, and Khadiza Sultana, a 16-year-old, were last seen boarding a flight to Turkey on Tuesday. The girls are believed to have been recruited by ISIS to become jihadi brides. Officials fear a militant met the girls in Turkey and has already smuggled them into ISIS-controlled territory in Syria. Parents of the three have made distraught pleas for them to come back home. A fourth teen, Aksa Mahmoud, is believed to have recruited the girls through Twitter. Her parents called her a disgrace to their family and the people of Scotland. In France, police have seized the passports of 6 alleged jihadists who were also planning to fight in Syria. It was the first time the anti-terrorism measure has been used. The law passed in November allows authorities to seize passports and identity cards of those suspected of going abroad to join terrorist groups. It's believed 1,400 French citizens have links to recruitment cells for Syria and Iraq, with 400 already there. The Ukrainian military says it could not pull weapons from the front as required under tenuous truce with Russia because their troops are still under attack. Kiev accused pro-Russian rebels of firing rockets at villages in southeastern Ukraine today. The reported violence further compromises the already shaky truce agreement negotiated a week ago. Last week, Russian rebels captured the strategic town of Debaltseve. New U.S. Secretary of Defense Ash Carter is already on the job. He's held a meeting with top U.S. military commanders and diplomats in Kuwait. The officials discussed the battle against the Islamic State. America's military effort has hit major hurdles in Iraq and Syria. Carter says the U.S. may use both diplomacy and its military, and he was pretty clear about his confidence.
Our discussion this afternoon affirmed the seriousness and the complexity of the threat posed by ISIL, especially in an interconnected and networked world. Lasting defeat of this brutal group can and will be accomplished.
Yemen Shiite rebels are threatening to arrest and charge the Prime Minister and all cabinet members if they refuse to return to work. The threat came a day after the rebel Houthis ordered Prime Minister Khalid Bahar and his government to get on the job, which they refused to do. In January, Bahar and the ministers were placed under house arrest by the rebels who had seized Sana'a. They resigned to protest the power grab. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry continued his Geneva trip, where 6 world powers met once again to negotiate a deal with Iran to contain its nuclear program. A spokesman says the talks have reached a sensitive stage, with gaps remaining mainly over Iran's uranium enrichment and the pace of removing sanctions. The parties have already missed a November 2014 target date. Now to Bangladesh, where the death toll rose to more than 70 people who died in a ferry accident where the boat turned over on the Padma River. Authorities say it was hit by a cargo vessel northwest of the capital, Dhaka. Close to 90 passengers were on board. At least 40 of them were rescued. Now to the UK. 2 former British foreign secretaries are suspended from their parties. They're being investigated to see if they broke rules forbidding lawmakers from trading influence for money. The Conservative Party's Malcolm Rifkind and the opposition Labour Party's Jack Straw were caught by an undercover reporter. The journalist posed as a representative of a company that purportedly sought to hire them. You're watching Arise News now.
Last week on Arise Exchange, the first full week of trading began with stocks, oil, and the euro all sliding hard.
When you think about oil, you want to think about how's that affecting your portfolio.
Republican House Speaker John Boehner may have a new Tea Party revolt on his hands. Jeff Flake threw a Playboy Mansion-like party for his daughter. Police discovered as many as 200 underage kids drunk. He is not only our favorite person of the day, but also the greatest dad of the year. Watch this week for more Arise Exchange.
Now to news out of Africa. In Nigeria, a young girl killed herself and several others in a suicide bombing. Over 40 people were wounded when she got out of a taxi in front of a busy market and detonated her explosives. Officials haven't immediately identified the girl, but witnesses say she appeared to be around 10 years old. No one has claimed responsibility for the bombing, but it does bear the signs of similar attacks carried out by Boko Haram. Over to Egypt, where activist Alaa Abdel Fattah has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. The blogger and software engineer was one of the public faces, of the 2011 revolution that removed Hosni Mubarak from power. The verdict came in a retrial of 25 defendants who had previously been sentenced to 15 years in jail for demonstrating against the military trials of civilians in 2013. The remaining defendants in the case received 3-year sentences on Monday, while 15-year jail terms were upheld for others tried in absentia. On to Asia and the Maldives, where police have taken the former leader to court. Mohammed Nasheed was arrested on Sunday and charged with abusing his powers while president in 2012. He's accused of illegally using the military to arrest a top criminal court judge. While in court, Nasheed complained that his arm hurt, saying police pushed him violently to the ground. A winter storm will continue to spread ice and snow from the Rockies to parts of the south. By the time it's done, there could even be snow on the beach in parts of the southeast. This storm is likely to cause hazardous travel conditions. A mixture of sleet, freezing rain, and snow is going across parts of the southern plains, spreading to Louisiana and Mississippi. Meanwhile, travelers are being forced to change their plans as more than 900 flights in and out of Dallas were cancelled because of freezing rain and storm warnings. The weather is also preventing Greyhound buses from driving north of Houston and San Antonio. Now, across the U.S., the bone-chilling cold weather simply won't go away. As a matter of fact, Tuesday could be the coldest morning this winter for some cities in the Northeast. Several daily temperatures showing record lows were broken early Monday. And get ready to bundle up for a second round of bitter cold, which will arrive later in the week. Coming up on Rise News Now, social media is still buzzing about the social awareness theme the Oscars took on in Hollywood. We'll have a report after this.
Here at Arise America, we want to bring you news from a different perspective, and not just news, but analysis as well. So let me ask you this. What is the realistic possibility of an inmate dying during one of these cell extractions?
Well, there have been many cases in which inmates have died through asphyxiation, through seizures, etc.
Now you have this little thumb drive, and you're using it, and now the Trojan horse sits in your computer. So you decide to go on some website, you decide to buy something. I've got now access to your bank, your credit card information, all your personal information.
You never are paid what you are needed. You are paid what you are able to deliver.
Acting as if the workplace
is never going to be worth $22.
You're acting as if the workplace today is the way it was when Debbie and I, and maybe you, I don't know, maybe that was a different generation, not sure, were coming up.
I have never worked for a news organization like Arise News. The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in. In this news organization, everybody's opinion counts. There is no big I's and little U's. Every angle, every perspective matters, and that's freeing in so many ways.
I don't think that television news in the United States reflects the diversity of the world. I don't think it does a great job of even reflecting the diversity of the United States.
When you are watching TV, you don't really see a lot of different cultures. There are plenty of other places that people might not even know about.
We are living in a global culture, and you cannot hide news that is happening when there's so much social media.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back. In entertainment news, all the golden statues are with the winners, but the Oscars is still treading around the world. Critics say the big surprise was the movie Birdman, taking home 5 Oscars, including the Best Picture. And Alejandro González Iñárritu was named Best Director. Best Actor went to British star Eddie Redmayne for The Theory of Everything. The 5th time was a charm for Julianne Moore, who won Best Actress for her role as a woman dealing with Alzheimer's in I'm Still Here. Fellow New Yorker J.K. Simmons' performance as an abusive music teacher in Whiplash earned him an Oscar as well. And Patricia Arquette clinched the only Oscar for Boyhood, the heavily favored movie that she produced and shot over a record 12 years. The perceived big loser of the night was American Sniper, which only won 1 Oscar for editing. This despite making more than $400 million at the box office. Our very own Shannon Lanier joins us from Hollywood with his thoughts on Hollywood's big night.
I'm still here in Hollywood, and the award show was amazing. I had such fun just being there, being in the energy of it all, being around the crowd. During the actual award show, it was a lot of fun because Neil Patrick Harris hosted for the first time. I mean, he's already done the Emmys 4 times. He did the Emmys twice and the Tonys 4 times, and this was no different. He was just amazing. He was fun, he was funny, he was energetic. He started the night off with this huge song where he was singing and dancing and poking fun at people, and they had this huge screen behind him, and he was interacting with the screen. It was amazing. And he also had a lot of fun poking fun at the Academy Awards because of the lack of diversity on the nomination ballot this year. He started off talking about that they were here to celebrate the best and brightest. And then he had the opportunity where he was introducing David Oyelowo, and everyone clapped for him, of course. And he said, "Oh, you like him now?" And that was just an example of him speaking to the fact that he was snubbed for Best Actor. So he had a lot of those moments where he was just having fun with the crowd. He even came on stage in his underwear, his tighty-whities at one point. He was making fun of the movie Birdman, where that also happened to Michael Keaton in that movie. And other highlights for me were when John Travolta came on stage and Idina Menzel was up there with him. But last year, if you recall, he was introducing Idina Menzel and pronounced her name like Adele Dazeem or something crazy. So they had a cute little bit and exchange back and forth about that. It was kind of weird. He kept touching her face, though. And Neil Patrick Harris, of course, made fun of that later as well. Other highlights for me of the award show was Common and John Legend singing Glory. It was a powerful song. It led people to tears. People were crying. One of the trends I saw last night were also the performances. A lot of people were loving the performances on social media. Jennifer Hudson sang the song, and it was part of the in memoriam that they did for passing actors and people in the industry this last year, and that was a powerful song. Lady Gaga did a amazing job, looking stunning, as she gave a tribute to Julie Andrews, singing songs, little mashups from her most popular movie. And it was just an amazing opportunity to see everyone at their best, looking their best, being their best. So I enjoyed myself. I can't wait to do it again next year at the 88th Annual Academy Awards.
Lucky you. Well, thanks, Shannon. Have a safe trip home. You're watching Arise News Now.
Here at Arise America, we want to bring you news from a different perspective, and not just news, but analysis as well. Tell me what it was like growing up gay in Uganda.
I have suffered sexual violence, including that has been planned by my family to heal me from lesbianism.
To have somebody lead your child away in handcuffs is just not something that should be done to a 12-year-old child.
You called this Victims Advocate Group, this phone number, which is sponsored by the Catholic Church, correct?
Right.
And what kind of response did you get?
They told me not to make prank calls and it wasn't appropriate and hung up the phone.
My God. Michael Dunn could go away for many decades. Is that enough for you?
No, it's not. The person that killed Jordan Davis has to be found guilty by a court of law in the United States of America.
If I was building my own network, it would be for the people, by the people. It would be very diverse. It would be with every culture you can think of.
If I was to start my own news network, it would reflect positive and negative within the continents and the countries around the world.
I think that I would be more looking towards young people.
If I were to build my own news network, it would look like New York City. Old, young, fresh, hip, classic.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and
And when Islamist rebels occupied the Malian city of Timbuktu in 2013, the toll on human life was considerable. But there was also some senseless attacks on important elements of Malian culture.
Retreating Islamist rebels set fire to 2 libraries containing ancient manuscripts as French and Malian troops retook the Malian city of Timbuktu in January 2013. Cushioning the blow of this enormous loss was the discovery that thousands of these priceless manuscripts had already been rescued by local families keen to protect their cultural heritage. The manuscripts were smuggled out to the capital Bamako, where earlier this year a conference was held to exhibit some of the surviving pieces dating from the 16th century.
Ils sont le témoignage d'une université qui a atteint son âge d'or.
They are the testimony of a university that reached its golden age during the 16th century, the University of Sankore, where there were great scholars. People came from everywhere, all over the world, to study at Timbuktu. These manuscripts, which are written in Arabic, for the most part are a wealth of intellectual knowledge that can teach us a lot about our humanity.
Of the small proportion of manuscripts that have been studied so far, topics include religion, jurisprudence, optics, and even conflict resolution. Having survived the insurgency, the precious texts are now facing another threat, the climate. The manuscripts are at risk of rapid deterioration due to the high humidity of the capital, leading conference participants to call for an emergency plan to optimize their storage conditions. Nearly 28,000 manuscripts are stored at the Ahmed Baba Institute. Meanwhile, in Timbuktu, 4 libraries are currently being restored. But with the backdrop of the ongoing conflict in the north, the future is far from secure for the return of these ancient manuscripts.